are now entering the Horror Sanctum.
Hello and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay with John and TJ, and we are incredibly excited to be joined by the legend, Eddie Munster himself, Mr. Butch Patrick. Butch, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, guys.
Thank you. So you are, after this past weekend, you have officially become the celebrity I've met the most. It's 3 times now with Manchester and then House of Cards twice. So I'm a fan, needless to say. You've always been nice and friendly. We greatly appreciate that. So when I saw you this weekend, I'm like, you should come on a show. And you're like, yeah, sure. And here we are. So thank you. I think a lot of us my age, the Munsters were kind of a gateway into horror. It was always on late night. That and Addams Family, like that kind of pushed us to where we are now. And I think we just start there naturally. I'm sure you get a ton of Munster stuff, so we'll try to keep it original as we can, but who knows? So today I read you auditioned with like maybe 100 other kids for the role of Eddie, and it said your teeth is what helped you get that role. Is that true? Like you had like some little fangs already?
Well, my eye teeth were my fangs. Yes, that's correct. The Munsters came about. It was a very unusual situation. Number one, I wasn't even living in Hollywood at the time of the casting. They offered the part to Bill Mumy. Bill Mumy turned it down for whatever reasons. He had other things going on. So they basically hired, and they went to a large casting call. And at the end of the casting call, the hundreds of kids, they had a pilot done with a kid actor named Happy Derman. And the mother's name at the time was Phoebe, not Lily, and the actress's name was Joan Marshall. They showed the pilot to the networks. The networks greenlighted the show, but they wanted to change the mom and the kid. So when my agent heard of that, she reached out to them and said, I know you've gone through an entire casting call and you're still looking for someone. And she goes, I think I got the answer. And it's Butch Patrick, and he's living in Illinois. And if you pick up the plane ticket, I think your problems will be solved. And at the same time, they reached out to Yvonne DiCarlo, who became available. And so they brought in a big star, and my agent convinced them to fly me out. And I did a screen test with them, and they said make arrangements to stay around because you'll report to work in a couple of days in wardrobe and this and that. So it really kind of accidentally came my way.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So
yeah. Go
ahead, John.
You go back and watch like other, like even the pilot, and I think maybe a movie or so where it had other characters. It's just not the same, like it's kind of like replacing Freddy Krueger. Like you can't do it and it be the same. You just can't. You're definitely Eddie Munster for everybody, for sure.
Yeah, it worked out really well. In the monster fact that the Universal Studios were the monster studio in the 30s. They started off with Frankenstein, as you all know probably, and it's very interesting to be part of that history because let's face it, they took Leave It to Beaver producers and Leave It to Beaver type scripts and applied them with Universal monsters and visuals and came up with a family friendly the Munsters, which for some reason resonates really, really well almost 60 years later. And I was lucky enough to be part of that, and it's been good to me. It's been a very fun ride, and it's not really horror, but it does have the best elements of what Universal offered on 2 tiers.
Wow. So I always wondered, as a child actor, you're on Munsters, you walk in the set. When you see Fred Gwynn in the makeup, is that one of those things where it's funny, you're having a good time, you guys are getting along, or are you first like terrified? Because even as a kid, that makeup was like kind of scary, with just him being so big and all. So
No, it was fun. It was always fun. Never was scared. Um, it was interesting. It was interesting because I know what they were doing, and I was a fan of the old movies, so I knew the Frankenstein monsters and the Mummy and all the good Universal stuff, and I also knew Leave It to Beaver. So I just completed a year of a show called The Real McCoys, the last year of The Real McCoys, which I did like a reoccurring regular. I did 8 episodes, but it was a good experience, and working with Walter Brennan and Richard Crenna was a good experience as well. So I was comfortable doing the series, definitely, but reporting to work every day, you would see Fred in his street clothes, and I was a little kid, and Fred was 6'7" anyway, so there was definitely a height factor looking up to him, no pun intended. But when the shoes came on and the makeup went on, then it became funny to me to see the transition. I thought it was very cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can only imagine. So I did read, and I don't know if this is true, but during the filming, you were living on the East Coast. And so you would go out every week to film. Is that true? Were you flying weekly and just going back home, or what was that like at that time?
No, what happened was my mom had married a baseball player with the Los Angeles Angels back then. And when my stint was up with the Real McCoys, he got traded to the Washington Senators, and the whole family went back east. But I stopped in Illinois to spend the 5th grade year with my grandmother. I enjoyed her company, and I liked Geneseo, so I decided they all went back east. My mom was pregnant with my 2 younger brothers. One was born, one was still in her tummy. So they all went with my sister, and I stayed with grandma. Then when the Munsters came about, I flew out to LA for the interview, got the part, and had nowhere to stay. So I moved in with my Uncle Woody. And then we hired a woman to take me to work. So I lived in LA, but I did fly back east to see my family once a month.
Oh, okay. Cool. Okay.
Very cool. So like probably most of us here, I grew up watching Nick at Night at my grandma's house because she had basic cable. We didn't get cable till I was in middle school, but I grew up watching Addams Family and the Munsters. They play them back to back. I know those shows released about the same time.
Exactly.
But I always preferred the Munsters because I love the Universal horror characters and everything. And I always thought that you were a great child actor there. And you shot 70 episodes of that show. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder, how long did it take to shoot like one episode? And then how different was that from like shooting the Munsters Go Home movie? And how long did that take?
Okay. We had a very basic weekly thing. Monday was a reading day, just go in the office about 10 o'clock and have some coffee, read the script, and everybody would go home, except I'd go to school for 3 hours. Tuesday was a rehearsal day, no makeup. We had a lot of different directors, so the directors would go on the soundstage and they would pretty much block out camera moves, lighting, and make it that way we had a little bit more efficient use of our time Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, which were makeup and film days. And it was just a cycle that we did over and over and over. Being a kid, I always had to leave by 6:30 on Friday, but sometimes they would film until 1 or 2 in the morning to finish up whatever needed to be done. But it wasn't too bad, and especially for the makeup factor for Fred, you had Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday off to recover from whatever makeup or this and that. So we had 3 days on, 4 days off of makeup. So it was somewhat tolerable. And then we also had summer off. It was well, not summer, but hiatus. Usually was in the spring after the holidays. So you did 39 episodes the first year. You had 12 weeks off, 13 weeks off. Then we did only 31 episodes the second year. Whether or not it was because they knew they weren't going to get renewed, or whether they were making plans to take that time and make the movie instead of doing the other series. And to answer your question regarding the feature in color versus the black and white episodes, the feature, by nature of a feature film, you film about half the amount of pages a day that you do on a TV show. So your setups are a little bigger, your scenes are a little broader, and there's a little more preparation to go into it. And they're usually a little more expensive to make, so they spend a little more time doing them and perfecting them. So what we had an hour-and-a-half movie, which would have been 3 episodes of us, that would have been normally a 3-week show, and it took 6 weeks to do the movie.
Okay. Well, 6 weeks is a still pretty tight turnaround time
Yeah.
for a big movie.
Yeah, it was, and we didn't go to England. We we went on the back lot,
Yeah.
but because we had been doing it was just an extension of John Carradine, who was Mr. Gateman, was Crookshank, the butler. We had the same cast. Debbie Watson stepped in for Pat Priest. The cars, but it was because it was from a series. It was probably a little faster and easier shoot than it would have been being a one-off.
Yeah, John Carradine, who played Dracula in the everything but the original Dracula with Bella in the Universal horror films.
John Carradine was a fantastic. I mean, I go back to the Grapes of Wrath watching John Carradine.
Oh yeah,
He's the Carradine family. I mean, we had a lot of it's like the Carradines were an acting family. We had the Westmores doing the makeup. They were like the Hollywood go-to best. Every studio had a Westmore as the head of their makeup department. Mike Westmore, who went on to win an Oscar for Mask, and he did Raging Bull. He was my makeup man, and he was an apprentice. I was like his first ward. His first job in the morning was to take care of me, and then he'd go do Pat Priest, and then he'd go up into the lab and make all the rubber pieces that were needed for the next day. But imagine having, as right out of the gate, I'm working with Mike Westmore as a rookie, so to speak.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long was your makeup? I know you had the Widow's Peak. Probably did some stuff with the fangs. What all did your makeup process entail?
Mine was pretty easy. Mine was an hour. First thing was to slick the hair back, a couple of scoops of Dep on each hand. And then while we were doing that, he would put the ears on first, let them start drying. By the time they were dry, the face would be done. And then the wax was on the eyebrows to apply the eyebrows. The last thing to go on was the Widow's Peak. And out the door you went about 45 to 50 minutes later.
So they still have to do like a lot of the pancake makeup stuff, even though it was like black and white filming?
Pancake was only for bodies and hands and knees. Pan stick is what we used. It's funny, originally they were using grease paint, and the grease paint cracked terribly under the hot lights. And they had to literally come up with a better way of doing it because the makeup wasn't working. And what they did is Max Factor developed a pan stick white and gray coloring that worked really well, very pliable, and gave us that thing because it was really a problem. The grease paint was not working at all. So luckily they fixed that, and we used pan stick. And like I say, it was sometimes an hour would be the max it would take to go on. And then I'd run down, might have my suit and jump into my wardrobe, get into school, and start my day.
Yeah, was it pretty much the same process in makeup, filming in color as black and white, or were there different things that had to be utilized there?
They just added more color to it. You're brighter and bolder, and better, more highlights on Lily's eyeshadow and Herman's cheeks. Just everything was just more poppier, bigger. And the funny part about it was they only did the feature really as a business strategy because they knew that they were going to be going into syndication, and syndication was around the corner. It hadn't really started yet, but everybody knew that nobody knew about the Munsters outside of the country. So the feature was a way for them to have a calling card to let other countries know, if you want to buy the Munsters, here's what it is. Look at the movie. You can have more.
Smart.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, it's a business. Imagine that. It's a business.
I know, right?
Right.
So I've seen a lot of your appearances. Your have the Coach and Dracula. I have to assume that they're recreations, or are they the originals?
The original Dracula is in my car club in New Jersey, but no, mine are just really good recreations. I had two of them about 8 years ago. I purchased them from a gentleman that I met, and he wanted to sell them, and I thought this would be a really good way for me because I'm a gearhead and I hot rods and cars and drag racing. So I thought, well, this is kind of fun. I'll be able to take the cars and travel around the country and meet people and utilize the cars, which I still do. But the new coat, but what I did is I sold those off because they were Chevy powered, and the original cars were 289 Fords. So the new ones I have are accurate Barris recreations, and my Dracula is amazing. And I also have a chopper thrown in that I kind of designed for myself a long time ago, and just bought it back from the gentleman in my car club. He bought the first one. We designed it, but he paid for it. So he wanted to get rid of it. So I reacquired that. And my new Munster coach, Accurate, will be done in October. So
awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's fun. I found a nice niche. I enjoy meeting people. I enjoy traveling. I enjoy cars. So for me, being friends with George all those years and being able to go to Barris's shop and befriending him and traveling the world with George. George and I went all over the world doing car shows together. It was great. He was like a Uncle George to me. He allowed me to free reign of everything. He was very happy that I was carrying on the Munster name. He may be more famous for the Batmobile, but he really liked the Munster coach and the Dragula because they were actually before Batman. So those were his first two big TV cars.
He did Kit too, right?
Yeah.
Right. He did the Kit. Yeah.
He had everything. And what happened was, even though some of the other people that came through his shop went on to do their own stuff, like Jeffries did the Monkey Mobile, but they all at one time or another had worked with or for George. So it was kind of like that was the customizer school or campus was George Barris's shop. Most people that went on to do great things at one time or another had worked with Barris.
Cool.
Very cool.
I've always been curious because Butch isn't your given name, right? Was that like a SAG thing, or how did you get that name Butch? Because Butch sounds like a perfect werewolf child name.
I don't think I've never run into a Butch that actually was his given name. It's usually a nickname. For me, my grandmother gave it to me the day I was born, and I was always called Butch. My real name is Patrick. So when Mary Grady was starting up her agency, and I was one of her first clients after her son Don Grady, who was Robbie on My Three Sons,
Cool.
I started very quickly. I went on an interview, and I got this little movie, and then one thing led to another. And then on General Hospital, the first few episodes of the series, I got those. And then the Real McCoys came along, and it was fun back in the day. Before the Munsters, there was a lot of fun shows that I was lucky to do. I did my two Mr. Eds. I did My Favorite Martian. Did I Dream of Jeannie after the Munsters? But back then, I did a lot of westerns. I could ride a horse because my uncle who I stayed with was a jockey before he grew too large to be a jockey. So I went to the track and I was around horses a lot. So I worked quite a bit before the Munsters. Butch is they just came up with Butch Patrick, and for some reason I think I'm still the only Butch in SAG. I haven't run across another one.
Really? That's fascinating.
I can't think of another one offhand.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's funny. You were talking about the horses and stuff. I was curious about, when you look up what you've worked on TV, you really were a who's who with a lot of those old school shows like Mr. Ed, Gunsmoke, Rawhide. And I saw this one time. I know Quentin Tarantino was talking about it with one of his films. He was talking about back in the day, actors, they had to ride a horse, they had to play the part. You had to do it. It was not like now. What was that like back then? Just, being a child actor, being in those kind of like, man's man tough environments, and what was it really more demanding at that time that you noticed from being a child actor, or do you think it's pretty much the same now?
It's probably different now, I would say. The thing about me, it was totally accidental. I never set out to be an actor. I went along for a car ride with my little sister and my mom to go have some photos done for my sister. And at the end of the photo shoot, this gentleman named Amos Carr, who was the go-to guy for Hollywood kids and stuff, and every kid in Hollywood had Amos Carr headshots done. So when they were done, he took some pictures of me and he put one of them in his window. It's not quite the Lana Turner and Schwab's drugstore, but the window was on Hollywood Boulevard, and a producer and a director were walking by, and they were casting a little B movie, and they still hadn't got the youngest kid. Mm-hmm. And my parents in the movie were Eddie Albert and Jane Wyatt. My older sister was Brenda Lee. She was 15 years old. Soupy Sales was the comic relief cop. And we had Nancy Culp, Mrs. Hathaway from the Beverly Hillbillies, playing the school teacher, and Eddie Albert played a principal. So here I am. They basically saw this picture, and they went in the door. They go, we want to meet this kid. And the guy goes, well, he's not an actor. He was just in with his sister, and I just took a couple shots. Said, well, do you know how we can get in touch with him? And he goes, yeah. So Mary Grady gets a call from George W. George and Randy Hood. I still remember their names, at 20th. And they reached out, and I went up for an interview. And my mom, I got a call when we got back home. They go, "Hey, yeah, Butch, we want to hire you." And my mom goes, "Hey, Butch, you want to do a movie?" And I go, "Do I have to go back to school?" And she goes, "Not for about 6 weeks." I go, "I'm there." So I showed up for work and went through the process and memorized my lines and did the job. It came pretty easy, and I knew I was making money, and I wanted to be a race car driver. So I just continued to do it as a hobby. That just was, I was never a career actor, but I did pretty well considering my mom would come after school and I'd be playing football or baseball, and she'd say, "Hey, we have an interview." And if I was in the middle of doing something, I usually wouldn't go. But if she caught me when I was not doing anything, well, then it would be okay. But I didn't drop everything to go running to Hollywood, and we lived about an hour away, so it was kind of a pain in the butt. You jump in the car, you got to drive an hour in traffic, and there's no guarantees you're going to get it. Then you drive it, but it was really kind of like not high on my priority list. But if the timing was good and I went up for it, and I was very lucky that I got a large percentage of the jobs that I went up on. I had a pretty good batting average, so that made it good, because if I was going up and never getting hired, I probably would stop immediately. But because I had a pretty good shot at, if I figure if I go, there's probably a 50-50 chance I may get it, then it's a little easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you find after your success with the Munsters that you had a pretty good batting average for those? Did that increase because people had more visibility?
I don't think so. I think it just stayed about the same. The thing with the Munsters was nobody kind of really knew what I looked like. Kid actors have a situation to where you change every couple of years. You're growing, your voice is changing, your whole you're going through a period. So kid actors, it's difficult to maintain anything because you're changing constantly. So the Munsters, I get a lot of people say, "Oh, were you feel you were typecast?" Well, if I was typecast, I would have been going on interviews in velvet shorts carrying a Wolf doll. That's not what I was doing. I was over at Disney doing work, and I did a lot of Disney. I had one really good year at Disney where I did, one summer, I did back-to-back 2-part World of Colors. Now, at that time, World of Colors were the classic sign-off show for the family on Sunday night. When the weekend was over, everybody would gather around the TV set and watch Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. So that was and that was the same year I did the Phantom Toll Booth, and it was the same year I did the Monkeys Christmas show. So I had a really good summer, autumn of that particular year, plus a few other things. But it was always temporary work for me. I never was looking past 18. When I turned 18, I knew I was going to quit, and so I think maybe that might have been part of the way it worked well for me, is I never took it seriously, and the attitude that the key was I usually just interpreted what they wanted myself the way I read it. Luckily for me, about 90% of the time, I was delivering what they were looking for. But the trick is when you don't do it, then you got to tweak it and you got to adapt to what the director asks you to do, which I could do as well. Yeah, that's kind of the key.
Okay. Well, I got a couple more questions. Going further into your career,
Sure.
I have to know about Lidsville, the Sid and Marty Krofft, the creators of HR Puffin stuff.
I watched the first episode today for the first time in my life, and it is scary as shit. But I loved it at the same time. Like it's like a fever dream.
Yeah, it looks terrifying. I have to know. So you were probably a teenager by that time, right? What was your experience with that? How'd you get that show?
That was the summer I turned 18. Marty Krofft had reached out to Mary Grady about me doing the show, and at the time I'm living at the beach. I got hair down to here. I look like Robert Plant. The last thing on my mind is wanting to do a Saturday morning kid show. But he was persistent, so I turned him down several times. And finally, at high school, I'm about ready to graduate Hollywood Professional School. And I was very good friends with the Cowsills, and we were hanging around, me and Barry and Paul and Susan and John. So I kind of told them my dilemma. I go, "What am I supposed to do with these guys? They want me to do a Saturday morning show. I don't want to do a Saturday morning show." And they go, "What are you, crazy? You never turn down work, and all your friends will be asleep. They'll never see it." I go, "Well, that's possible." So Sid Krofft took me to lunch one day, and we're talking, and he's telling me about it, and he's basically said, "We made Jack Wilde a star." I go, "No, well, slow down here. Slow down with the BS. Jack Wilde was a star before you ever got a hold of him from Oliver, and he was a nominated actor for Best Supporting Actor for The Artful Dodger. So don't blow smoke, But what got me was I went out to the studio and I saw a picture of the Bugaloos, And the girl in the Bugaloos was Caroline Ellis was her name, and she was real cute. So I said to him, I said, "Is there any chance that she might be wandering around if I come out here and work?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, she's here all the time." Well, she was in England. He lied to me. So I signed on to do Lidsville, thinking I might run into Caroline Ellis, and then Charles Nelson Riley and Billy Hayes and Sharon Baird, a bunch of little people I knew, because in Hollywood they use for stand-ins for kids, they use little people, they don't use other kids. So I basically was on a set with a lot of people that were very friendly that I knew well. So it was 11 weeks work. We did 16 episodes, and it went on to be very popular.
Yeah.
My favorite one was
and it was scary.
Colored hat that had the cigar in his mouth.
It was a weird show. I mean, those boys were on some serious drugs.
Oh,
Definitely.
I'm sure.
70s. Oh yeah.
I'm sure it's a very different show on drugs than it would be just watching it straight. But so, did you actually get to meet and hang out with Charles Nelson Riley? Because he was kind of a character and was known.
Worked for him for 11 weeks. Worked with him for 11 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if he did a lot of just like voiceover stuff, or if he actually got to be on set with you.
He was there. He was there every day except the one day he boycotted the show and had a fight with the producers, and we all showed up for work except Charles. And it was like 2 hours. It was like, I guess we're taking the day off. Thanks.
He was such a character.
So,
yeah, the laugh. I think we all know him from the old game shows, but
Match Game. Or
yeah.
Alec Baldwin does a good scene.
Oh, Alec Baldwin did a great one on SNL. Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching him. It was like a week ago he was on it. It was so strange, like seeing all that. It was, Match Game.
So I also have to know about how you got into music, and tell us a little bit about Eddie and the Munsters, because I've seen some of the music videos from the 80s and they're pretty cool.
Yeah, the early MTV videos were pretty cool, and that's kind of why we did Eddie and the Munsters. I wanted to get into the rock video business, didn't have any experience, so I wrote the lyrics to the Munsters theme. I had a friend who knew a producer at a recording studio. The drummer, his name was Reek Havoc. He's still friend. We're still friends. We were childhood friends. So we decided we would do a video, Whatever Happened to Eddie, and would sort of be our calling card. And the neat part about that was we were the first unsigned act ever to be on MTV, which back in the day, it was called pay for play, payola. And you couldn't get anywhere unless you were paying off somebody. So we were very proud of the fact that we got up there and we got the MTV and BS'd our way up the tower, and they actually aired it on Super Bowl Sunday. People still remember it, believe it or not. It was a little one-night shoot. I think it cost $3,500 at the time, and all the extras and I borrowed, you saw the car I was driving was the car from George Barris' shop. It was John Travolta's that then wound up in the Jerk that Steve Martin was driving.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we pulled it off. We pulled it off in one night, no permits. We would just shut a street down for a second, do what we needed to do, and then run away. And but I was very proud of it. And the funny thing about it was I also had a record deal with Metro Media in 73 when 72, 73, when Bobby Sherman was let go. They wanted to replace him with a bubblegum star that they were convinced. The guys that managed Sugarloaf reached out to me and they says, would you like to do records? I go, I don't sing. They go, it doesn't matter. I go, well, what do we have to do? And then they said, here's how much money you can make, and this is how we'll do it. And I go, okay, sounds like a reasonable deal. And a couple of weeks later, I'm on American Bandstand, and we went on the road. But not being able to sing live was a definite issue. But I told them up front. So I like to think of myself as the original Milli Vanilli, except Munster Vanilli. I myself Munster Vanilli, and we did that. It was a great time. Everybody should be a rock star for a year and spend a bunch of money and travel around. It was wild. And then when the Eddie and the Munsters came on, I wrote the lyrics and my guitar player sang, and the bass, I didn't play bass that well. So Phil Cohn, my producer, played the bass. So I doubled up and faked the bass, and I lip sync.
Oh, so that's not you singing on the video?
No, that's my Brent Black, but his voice sounds a lot like mine.
Yeah, it sounds like you.
He could he could hit the notes. Today, believe it or not, I probably could sing it. I don't know what happened, but for some reason, lately, a couple times have come up when someone said to hit a note like Dickie Roberts or something, at the end of Dickie Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
And I muddled through it a little bit, kind of doing like a William Shatner talking thing, not really trying to sing, more of a narrative.
Nice.
Hey, I think he got a Grammy doing that, so you might have a whole nother career.
Yeah, I'm pretty much out of the movie. The only thing I do now is that people ask me to participate in something that they've got going on, and the content's there, and it's acceptable, and it's easy, and it's in my wheelhouse. I try to accommodate them whenever I can, because I like to kind of give back. The business has been good to me, and a lot of filmmakers, young filmmakers, are very much Munster fans, and they really like the idea of having somebody, Eddie Munster, in their project. So, if it's possible, I always try to say yes.
That's awesome. Piggybacking a little bit on the Eddie and the Munster thing, have you ever thought about picking that back up at all? Like doing like a little tour now? Yeah, because Ari Lehman from Friday the 13th,
sure.
he tours all the time under First Jason. I've actually booked him here in town a couple times.
Yeah,
I probably market for that if you ever want to flirt with the idea.
There totally would be, especially in Nashville.
I'm very, very happy just doing the circuit with my cars and stuff.
Yeah. I got two more things, and then we can wind down. One thing I always like to ask our guests is, did you ever take anything from the sets, like the Munsters specifically? Did you take anything home with you, like Woof Woof or anything?
Well, Woof Woof I got 7 years later doing an Ironside. I didn't get him at the time I left the show, but what I did is I would always bring home my ears or a Herman headpiece now and then. And but when I got them home, I'd give them away to local kids, because they didn't. I was actually wearing the darn thing. So when I saw how much joy it brought other people acquiring stuff that I could bring home on scripts and this, I gave everything away, because, like I say, I wasn't really a collector, and it was more of a temporary job for me. But I always enjoyed giving stuff to people that seemed to enjoy it more than I did. And Wolf Wolf was given to me by Eddie Keys. Like I said, after the show, 7-8 years later on an Ironside, he was at Universal, and he handed me the doll. I said, well, first he says, don't go anywhere. He said, put this in the trunk of your car and don't open it up until you get out off the studio lot, because I don't want anybody seeing you with it. And it turned out to be Wolf Wolf. So that was cool. Now I've got like 4 or 5 of them, different variations of them, because the one that I had fell apart. So we've made more over the years. One of the things I wanted to mention, though, before we go, well, I'll let you finish up, and then signing off, I'll tell you what I'm up to.
Okay. So my last question was a Rob Zombie question. I know he finished the movie before he let you know, right? And then he asked you to be the voice of the Tin Can Man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much you know about the rest of that. I think he recently said that he's not going to make a sequel. I don't know if you're aware of any Eddie Munster talks, if he did or make a sequel, if that's the direction they would go, or if he said anything about like maybe a first draft of the film Eddie Munster was in it, or he just wanted that straight origin love story.
It just was the love story pre-Marilyn, pre-Eddie. That was the structure. It left it wide open. Had there been a need for a sequel, he certainly left the door open for it. I read that myself, I believe yesterday, about he said he would never do a sequel. It's kind of, that's his call. I know it was a lot of work. I know it was real time consuming and draining, and plus he's got a lot going on. But I'm glad he did it. It was fun. It was entertaining. I think it was neat the way they explained the greatest love story ever told. So I thought he set out to do what he wanted to do. And like I say, it doesn't necessarily mean it may never happen. If he says it will never happen, maybe somebody else may pick up the stick. You never know.
I enjoyed it a lot. Of course, I'm a huge Rob Zombie fan anyway, so I'm slightly biased. But when it came out, when the rumors came out, everybody was freaking out. He's going to make it rated R. He's going to say F this and F that. And then I was always the one guy I ever saw, like, no, he's not. Like, this is a passion project for him. He's going to make it and do it justice, which he did, and that just pissed people off too. Like he could not have won on that at all.
Well, I knew it wasn't going to be that way because Universal wouldn't allow it. Universal had guidelines that they had to adhere to if he was going to do it at all. So I knew that it wouldn't be anything but PG, just because the Munsters franchise is so valuable to the Universal that they're not going to go that direction. So it worked out really well. Great guy, Rob. Really happy I had a chance to meet him. And where I met him, I briefly met him in Philadelphia like 15 years ago. But where I really got to know him was sitting when we did the narration for the new Blu-ray came out back in 2019, right before the pandemic. We sat in a theater for an hour and a half with Justin Beam from Shout Factory.
I know him, Justin. Yeah.
Doing moderation. And he sat there and we watched the movie in real time, and we just asked me questions about it. So we chatted about the movie, and it's in like I say, in real time. And that's where I got to know Rob a little bit. And then I went to his house and brought my Munster coach along and let him drive it, and got to meet them and Sherry. And we're not like best friends, but he's very, very approachable. And I text him, he gets right back to me and stuff. And it's a good thing. I'm hoping one of these days, if he ever wants a Dragula, he knows where to go to get one.
Right. Awesome. Well, that was my last question. If you want to get to what you were going to say.
Oh, I was just saying, down here, and I'm in Conway, Arkansas. I came down here a few years ago for when the Munsters pinball machines came out. A gentleman, when I was in Dallas at the pinball festival, he said, would you like to come to Conway? I have an arcade, and we have a festival down here called Toad Suck Days. So I go, Toad Suck Days in Arkansas? That sounds like a hoot. So one thing led to another, and I came down here a few years ago. And then last year, I had a residency at a theme park go south on me at the last minute. So I was like, damn, I didn't book myself, and I'm kind of sitting on nothing. So he said, well, it's Toad Suck weekend. You got to come back down, which I did. And now I've found some business interests here, and it's really good, and some friendships, and I really like the area a lot. So this year I'm finally opening my first haunted attraction. I'm building on a gentleman that's got a place called Creepy Works. He's been open 13 years, but he's got a big building that he sells fireworks in. And then after July 4th, I'm going to turn it into a Munsters pavilion of sorts. And what I'm going to do is I'll have all my Munster stuff on display. I'm going to recreate the living room. I'm going to recreate Grandpa's dungeon. Obviously, we'll have a upright phone booth that you can use and a few other things. But what I'm really excited about is I'm going to have one big giant screen on the right showing nothing but the Universal Monster movies of the 30s. And I'm going to explain to people that all this horror genre of Halloween stuff that everybody loves so much, this is where it all started. And then on the other side, I'm going to show the Munsters, and I'm going to say, this is where the Munsters came from. So people are going to get an education, but they're also going to be entertained. And then they go out and go through the vortex into the haunted attraction. So it's going to be a really cool thing. It's going to be a meet and greet and a mixer and an educational. It's going to be a mausoleum, so to speak.
Sounds amazing. Sign us up. We'll be there for sure.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Arkansas is not too far away. We'll do a live remote or something. If you
I got a buddy in Fort
promote it.
Smith anyways. I can stay with him.
There you go. Yeah, it's really cool. I'm really excited about it. So yeah, it's worked out really well. And I'm on the road, and Munsters.com, official Munsters fan group. People on social media can keep up with me. I'm on the road quite a bit. Everything's good. So life has been good to Eddie Munster.
Awesome. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to wherever you're listening to this podcast, and follow us on Instagram. Butch, thank you again so much. It was amazing. I know you have the Nashville Comic-Con coming up. That's on June 3rd and 4th, which is put on by Jason Marsden, who lives in town now. That's at the Nashville Fairgrounds. You can get tickets at NashvilleComicCon.com. I went last year. It was a lot of fun. I asked for a refund because one of the guys I wanted to see canceled. So I asked Jason, I've met him a few times. I'm like, can I get my money back if that's the reason I'm going? And he gave me so much shit, to the point where I still went, and I was in line, and he was outside talking to everybody with a megaphone. He comes up, he sees me while he stops, turns around, and over that megaphone, he's like, guess you showed up anyways, huh? I will never forget that, him shaming me in public. But even though he did that, I will still be there.
He's a character.
Yeah, he is for sure. And head over to the Munster, head over to Munsters.com. That's Munsters with a U. You can check out Butch's other upcoming appearances, merchandise, and a lot of other cool stuff too. So, all right. So from all of us here at 1313 Mockingbird Lane, I'm Jay with Butch, John, and TJ. And until next time,
keep it spooky.